Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 93. Fragments of the Past. The white light flashed once more, and the third month, with the wind blowing and the grass growing, had arrived in Jiangnan. Hung Jun and Liu Su were hovering above a bank lined with willows, watching Hung Jun's father steering a small boat, while little Hung Jun was slumped along the edge of the boat, watching the fish in the lake. His mother suddenly tossed out a slender jade hand and splashed little Hung Jun in the face. Little Hung Jun was dumbfounded, while his mother laughed loudly. Neither Hung Jun nor Liu Su could resist laughing at that. Amidst the thunder and pouring rain, in the temple at the peak of the mountain, a black jiao flew over, taking Yang Qiuzhong's form. Hung Jun and Liu Su looked into the yard. Yang Qiuzhong and Kong Xian were standing shoulder to shoulder under the eaves of the hallway, their heads raised to watch the rain. "He wasn't the one who forced us to move," Hung Jun remarked. "Speaking of which, it's strange," Liu Su said curiously, studying Kong Xian and Yang Qiuzhong. "Why is it that at times, your dad seems like he bears a grudge against Xiaoyu, but at other times, they seem like friends?" Hung Jun frowned. "It's been quite a few years since then, perhaps they already resolved the issues between them. Or he was deceived by Xiaoyu. Do you hate him?" Liu Su replied, "There is no lasting constancy in life. Birth, old age, illness, death, all are foreordained, so what point is there in hatred? If I hadn't been controlled, my parents wouldn't have died. It's just like you, I also killed my mother and father. But the one who caused this all was Xiaoyu," Hung Jun said earnestly. "The wood has already been built into a boat. What point is there in hatred?" Liu Su asked. "Never mind that sooner or later, Xiaoyu will die. You've seen the future?" Hung Jun asked. "I have faith," Liu Su replied. Spring left and autumn arrived. Yellow leaves drifted in the wind, and as the scenery changed, Hung Jun swiftly returned to the Chang'an of many years ago. The him of that time had already grown older, and he quickly ran out of the courtyard, all while turning his head back to look every now and then. "Kong Hung Jun!" His mother's voice called loudly. Little Hung Jun eyed in response to that, before making a hand gesture at little Li Jinglong up on the wall. Little Li Jinglong immediately hid himself behind the wall, while little Hung Jun hurriedly stepped into a flower bed, lowering his head and pretending to watch the earthworms. "Mom's heading out for a bit," his mother said, straightening the embroidered bag in her hand. "I'm heading to the Western market to sell goods. What do you want to eat tonight?" "Anything's fine," little Hung Jun said, bored. "Why haven't you been whining to eat meat recently?" Jiayuz asked curiously, even as she herself walked out. "How was my family so poor when I was small?" Hung Jun asked. Liu Su replied, "When I was small, my family was even poorer than yours." Hung Jun was torn between laughing and crying. Before, his mother had even had to embroider things to sell so that they could make a living, while his father's shadow couldn't be seen. He had probably gone out to work as a doctor to earn them some money. "Gag! Gag!" little Hung Jun shouted towards the other side of the wall. Young Li Jinglong stuck his head out again, asking, "Your mom's gone?" Saying that, he let down a shapeless rope ladder. Little Hung Jun climbed up, and the two of them put the ladder away. Hung Jun and Liu Su flew over the wall. The Li Jinglong of that time was not yet 10 years old, and he opened up a food box and handed it to little Hung Jun. "Look at how hungry you are," Liu Su said expressionlessly. Upon seeing this, Hung Jun wanted nothing more than to dig a hole in the ground to hide himself in. He had truly been too disgraceful as a kid, but Liu Su comforted him. "When I was small, I also ate anything that I could. We were too poor, so I could never eat my fill." Hung Jun didn't know who to blame either. He watched his younger self, feeling a great deal of heartache. After they ate, little Li Jinglong and little Hung Jun played chess in the corridor. A while later, little Li Jinglong opened up a book, and little Hung Jun taught him meditation and some basic martial techniques. Why are you always so dejected? Because I have a yaogui in my heart. Is the yaogui in your heart a demoralizing yao? You can be cured. Rest assured, count on Gag. I can't be cured, and my dad and mom can't cure it either. They argue every day. Do you hate him? Lu Su asked. I loved him far too early, Hung Jun said helplessly. What choice did I have? Hung Jun and Lu Su sat shoulder to shoulder on the wall. Time flew past in a flash, and the sunlight streamed down brilliantly. Hung Jun slowly began to feel a thread of familiarity, as if those memories that belonged to him were slowly coming back a bit at a time. Little Li Jinglong was in the yard teaching little Hung Jun how to dance the Sogdian whirl, both of them laughing as they did. The two of them pushed and pulled each other, bathed in the sunlight. What's wrong now? Little Li Jinglong asked. Someone shouted for Li Jinglong from the outside, and little Hung Jun took a step back, saying, Someone's calling for you, go ba. I won't go. Little Li Jinglong replied earnestly, and he smiled as he looked at little Hung Jun. Little Hung Jun once again fell silent. Gag will teach you to play Chuivan. Little Li Jinglong held a wooden stick, and he kicked a ball into motion. Halfway through their game, Chiayus came back, searching for him everywhere. Little Hung Jun hurriedly climbed up the wall, and when they bid goodbye to each other, each of them hung off the wall on either side, intently watching the other. Little Hung Jun's words dried up once more, before he finally turned and leapt down, running away. Hung Jun asked absent-mindedly, if there was a 7-year-old child who said to you, there was a yaogui in his body, would you believe him? Lu Su froze at that for a moment. Hung Jun frowned faintly and continued, many young children like to make up wild fantasies, and no matter who they tell it to, no one would believe them, would they? Lu Su thought deeply for a moment, before replying, you think that he became Derangis Pan a long time ago. On the other side of the wall, Li Jinglong put away the wooden stick for Chuivan, coming to a stop under the eaves of the corridor. He picked up a book, lowered his head, and began to read it. No, Hung Jun said, shaking his head lightly. Look into his eyes. His gaze doesn't have even a hint of falsehood in it. Lu Su also noticed that. The little Li Jinglong of then, when he spoke with little Hung Jun, was always smiling. As soon as he saw little Hung Jun, he would smile, and it was as if his entire being had changed. But after little Hung Jun left, little Li Jinglong seemed to still be in that same joyous mood, and as soon as he heard the sound of conversation from his neighbor's side, he couldn't resist a glance up. Hung Jun suddenly asked, can you find the memories of that day when he and I first met? Let me try, Lu Su said quietly, before closing his eyes and tightening his grasp on Hung Jun's hand. Time flowed past them. That was a day in late autumn. Kong Xian's family was moving into their new home. Little Hung Jun had just clambered off the horse carriage when 9-year-old Li Jinglong passed through the back alley, carrying a bamboo tube. Inside the bamboo tube were bugs chirping away, and before he walked through the doors to his house, he unconsciously turned his head and glanced. And little Hung Jun stood outside the horse carriage, staring dumbly at the Li Jinglong of that time. As soon as Li Jinglong saw Hung Jun, he stopped in his tracks, frozen in place. Little Hung Jun saw the bamboo tube that Li Jinglong was holding, and he was very curious. But neither of them opened their mouths to address the other, and time itself seemed to have frozen. Kong Xian called from inside the courtyard, Hung Jun. Little Hung Jun hurried in at that. Little Li Jinglong's face was still fixed in an expression of shock. Hung Jun thought to himself, what are you surprised about? He's shocked at how pretty you are, Lu Su said. This was Hung Jun's consciousness, and as soon as he had that thought, Lu Su had sensed it. Lu Su added, look at how dirty and scruffy he is. The children that he sees usually probably aren't much better. Jinglong's family is rich, Hung Jun smiled. His friends and playmates should be all right. Though he said that, Hung Jun's appearance and attitude when he was young was in the end different from mortals. He himself could see it as well. Compared to the current Li Jinglong, the young Li Jinglong entirely lacked the handsomeness that the current one possessed, and was also slovenly in appearance. He seemed to be a little bit of a rascal, and he seemed like an older child that liked to cause trouble everywhere he went. Li Jinglong's mother passed away very early in his life, so no one took care of his food and clothes. It wasn't until he was 10+ years old that he slowly learned the ways of those dandies, and later, when he entered the Longwu army to be a soldier, he finally gained that heroic air and serious, self-controlled charm. When he was young, his entire being seemed shifty, not at all a likable child. "This was when you two first met," Lu Su said. "Pretty common," Hung Jun replied quietly. "But since we didn't speak to each other, it doesn't count. Let me help you search some more," Lu Su offered. Lu Su closed his eyes, and the light diffused. The autumn air was fresh and crisp, and it was not long after the Kong family had moved in. Boxes and random objects were still piled in the courtyard, but little Hung Jun had clearly grown bored, because he was digging through the piles, searching for something. He managed to find a book, that was the same Yaogui compendium that he had given Li Jinglong once upon a time. He lay there amongst a pile of cloth, and after flipping through the compendium for a while, he fell asleep. It was right then that little Li Jinglong had climbed up the camphor tree in his yard to go filch from a bird's nest, and he turned his head unconsciously only to see little Hung Jun soundly asleep under the autumn sunlight. He forgot all about the bird nest, clung to the branch, and stuck his body out to look down. Little Hung Jun was soundly asleep. Little Li Jinglong watched for a while, before calling to him, "Hey!" Since he didn't get a response, little Li Jinglong tossed a pebble his way, waking him up. Buletin the still didn't get a response. Little Hung Jun studied him warily, before turning and heading back inside. "For things to go like this the first time that he spoke," Lu Su said, "is also pretty ordinary." Hung Jun originally believed that their first meeting in their youth would have some sort of feeling of predestination, yet he hadn't expected that it would be as ordinary as one of the countless trifles that happened in those tens of thousands of normal days and nights that passed in this one of a multitude of worlds. "How about the first time I talked to him?" Hung Jun asked. Lu Su replied, "My guess is that it will be all right," Hung Jun said helplessly. "Though it will definitely be very ordinary, I still want to see it." White light flashed past, and it was still that same wall. Little Hung Jun lifted his head, watching the blue sky on the other side of the wall. A heavy lock hung off the wooden entrance to the courtyard. Little Hung Jun pressed his ear against the door, listening to the hubbub outside. His expression was desolate and grieved, like a bird that had been caged. He listened for a while, before pulling out a length of rope with a hook on one end. "Lu Su." Hung Jun put one hand against his forehead. "Lu Su, you learned to climb walls at such a young age, while I was still digging for earthworms in that snowy ground." "Hung Jun, don't say any more." Little Hung Jun tossed the hook a few times, but he didn't manage to hook onto anything, and it fell back down. With a flash of inspiration, he turned to throw that hook over the neighbor's wall. There were tiles on the roof of the wall around the door, so it was difficult to hook, but the wall adjoining his neighbor's yard was easy. Little Hung Jun kicked off and climbed up the wall, borrowing the wall around his neighbor's yard to sneak out. This was truly a brilliant idea. He climbed, panting for breath, up to the top of the wall, only for a person to suddenly appear out of nowhere across from him. Little Hung Jun immediately let out a loud shout, and little Li Jinglong also let out a shout in response. Little Hung Jun had never expected that there would be someone on the other side climbing the wall, but little Li Jinglong reacted in a flash, and he reached a hand out and grabbed him tightly. "What are you doing?" little Hung Jun shouted. "I'm gonna let go," little Li Jinglong said expressionlessly. "Don't," little Hung Jun hurriedly cried. "Don't let go." "Call me Gag," little Li Jinglong said. "Your mouth's so soft." Little Hung Jun's face immediately flamed red. Just now, when he was climbing the wall, he had just been clambering over, but he remembered that he hadn't touched him, so he shouted, "Did not. I kissed you." "You didn't." "Then I'm letting go." Little Hung Jun had never been bullied like this by anyone, and he immediately began to cry. Little Li Jinglong, one hand dangling over the wall, hurriedly said, "Okay. I didn't. I didn't." Gag. Just as Li Jinglong was conceding, Little Hung Jun admitted defeat. His face was streaked with tears, and his mouth was drawn into a pout as he called Li Jinglong that. Little Li Jinglong's face was immediately filled with pleased surprise. He hadn't expected that Little Hung Jun would actually cave, so he immediately flipped up onto the wall, straddling it, pulling Little Hung Jun up so he could hug him. After gaining his reward, he let out another shout, before Little Li Jinglong picked Little Hung Jun up horizontally and flipped over the wall just like this, jumping down. In the air, Hung Jun and Lu Su both stuck their heads out to watch, their eyes filled with curiosity. "Here, eat something, don't cry anymore. I'll give you a kiss, don't cry." All right, stop crying. I want to go home. Taste this first, then I'll send you back." The crying on the other side of the wall suddenly stopped. Little Hung Jun was chewing something, even as he pushed away Little Li Jinglong who was crowding into his space. The two of them had their backs to the wall as they pushed and nudged each other. Little Li Jinglong found this very funny, and he laughed. "What's your name? You're called Hung Jun, isn't that right? You're Dr. Kong's son. Don't go. I still have more here, look, this is even tastier." "That's right, come back, now that's right." The leaves of the camphor tree rustled, and the summer sunlight shone down. Little Li Jinglong's silhouette and Little Hung Jun's silhouette flashed in and out, appearing in every corner of the Li family backyard. Sometimes, the two children were playing chuivan, sometimes they were fishing for shrimp in the fish pond in the backyard, and when it snowed, they even made snowmen. The wall between the Li family and Kong family's yards was also torn down with that, changing to a copse of trees instead. At twilight, Kong Xian stood in front of the copse calling for Little Hung Jun to come home, so Little Hung Jun waved to Little Li Jinglong, before he turned and went home to eat dinner. As soon as Little Hung Jun left, the yard slowly grew bleak. There was no one in the Li family residence. "Where's his dad?" Lu Su asked. "He probably went to war," Hung Jun replied. "Or the Yamen is very busy." He seemed to have mentioned before that his dad was a martial official. Little Li Jinglong went back inside and ate a few pieces of pastries. He laid in the open-air corridor, watching the sky. From next door came the sound of Hung Jun's mother's laughter, and if he listened closely, Kong Xian had made a joke. He said that Hung Jun seemed like a chicken that had lost its feathers, and that tickled Little Li Jinglong so much that he couldn't resist laughing too. The light slowly dimmed, and Little Li Jinglong laid on his bed, ill. His forehead was covered with sweat, and he couldn't stop gasping for breath. In the dark room, Little Hung Jun slowly walked towards the ill Li Jinglong. Little Li Jinglong couldn't stop panting, and he turned his head to look at Little Hung Jun, quietly murmuring, "Dad! Mom!" Little Hung Jun tilted his head as he looked at him. Little Li Jinglong's chest rose and fell, and he panted hard. Little Hung Jun hugged Little Li Jinglong, pressing himself against his body. He simply held him quietly like this, listening to his heartbeat. "I'm so cold," Little Li Jinglong said. "Where's your dad?" "He's gone on a long trip," Little Hung Jun said quietly, hugging him just like this. "He's been gone for so long." "Gag, what's wrong?" "I'm going to die," Little Li Jinglong said in response. As he spoke, his chest rose and fell like a bellows. "Stay with me for a while, don't go." Little Hung Jun leapt off the bed and ran outside. When he returned, he was holding a bundle of medicinal ingredients in his hand, and he began to stew the medicine for the sick patient on the bed. Little Li Jinglong opened his eyes, his vision slowly growing blurred. One hand reached out aimlessly, dangling there, before finally little Hung Jun climbed onto the bed and fed him the medicine. Little Li Jinglong's face was white, and his entire body trembled. He gritted his teeth so the medicine wouldn't go down, and it trickled down the corner of his mouth, dripping onto the bed. Little Hung Jun tried several times, but every time, he failed in the end. Little Li Jinglong only breathed out, he inhaled no longer. End chapter. Legend of Exorcism. Chapter 94. Two innocent playmates. The two of them looked at each other for a while. Little Li Jinglong seemed like he wanted to say something, but little Hung Jun pressed his left hand against his chest, while he held the bowl with his right. He drank a mouthful of medicine, then leaned down and kissed him on the lips, using his tongue to deliver the medicine into little Li Jinglong's mouth. Another mouthful, and another mouthful. Hung Jun's eyes widened at this, watching the scene of his childhood self scooting close to little Li Jinglong and feeding him medicine. He's starting to grow warm. Little Hung Jun muttered to himself, before laying down by little Li Jinglong's side on the bed. He turned and hugged his waist, picking up Li Jinglong's arm and putting it under his head as a pillow, keeping him company as he slept. This scene, and the actions he had taken, were actually exactly the same as when he hugged Li Jinglong to sleep when he had grown up. Little Li Jinglong was still shivering non-stop, but as the medicine began to spread through his body, his condition slowly started to turn for the better. He turned over and hugged little Hung Jun. Woo! Woo! Little Hung Jun raised his head, studying little Li Jinglong curiously. Little Li Jinglong cried for a bit, evidently, he felt pretty terrible, but slowly he fell asleep. Why is that child always at home alone? Haven't you often locked Shuing up at home as well? Is that the same? Transferring to Luoyang, yet not even bringing his child with him. If it wasn't for Xinger running into him, he would have died from that cold. You men are all the same, you all think that as long as they're born, you can toss them into a field and they'll still grow. How is it my fault again? If you see him alone at home, then call him over for a bit. Xinger is also very lonely, so isn't it a good thing that he has a companion? Let's discuss that later. Kong Xian, why do I always feel that something's strange? This child of our neighbors, the Li family, I've heard multiple people say, he often wanders around at will outside, nor does he go to school. And what of it? Ever since we moved in, why has that child always been at home? He likes to be with Xinger, probably. Stop being so suspicious of everything, how can there be so many spies? Yes, you can keep him locked up for a time, but not for his entire life. As he slowly grows up, he'll need to get in contact with humans sooner or later. Li Jinglong. Little Li Jinglong had already recovered from his illness, but he was still a little weak. He waited in the flower garden, his attention drifting, as he held a little box in his hands. In that box were candies for Hung Jun. Little Hung Jun climbed over the garden fence. According to Kong Xian, this fence should also be torn down to make it easier for the two children to play together, but because he was too busy on a daily basis, he hadn't done anything about that for a long while. When little Hung Jun heard his parents discussing the Li family, he asked, "You aren't going out to play?" Little Li Jinglong waved his hand. Without understanding why, little Hung Jun added, "Go play something else ba." "I won't," little Li Jinglong said loyally. "It's more fun to toy with you." Little Hung Jun hadn't understood either, and he sat down next to little Li Jinglong, their shoulders touching. Little Li Jinglong studied him, before asking, "Do you want to take a walk outside?" Of course little Hung Jun wanted to, but his parents had only just agreed to let him and Li Jinglong be friends, after much difficulty. His father liked Li Jinglong a lot, but his mother was always a little wary, so she often reminded Hung Jun that playing around was all right, but he couldn't take even a single step outdoors. "I'll take you," little Li Jinglong said quietly. "Let's go, we just have to get back before your mom comes back." Little Hung Jun's heart was torn. Ever since he was born, he had almost never spoken to anyone outside of his parents. My mom said that if I go outside, I'll get taken away by Yaogwai. I'll protect you, little Li Jinglong said. I know sword techniques. Normal sword techniques aren't a match for a Yaogwai. I know magic sword techniques. Relax. Little Li Jinglong grabbed little Hung Jun's hand, ready to take him away. Little Hung Jun was conflicted for a long while, before finally, he was half dragged, half carried out the door by little Li Jinglong. The hubbub of daily life sounded outside, and carriages clattered across the cobbles. Thousands of houses rose from the ground, a peaceful realm towering above him. Little Hung Jun had just walked out of the alley outside his home when he immediately grew transfixed by the sight before him. The day he had come to Chang'an, he had been sleeping on the carriage the entire way there, and it was also dark. Seeing the splendid Chang'an of today, however, caused him to watch it unblinkingly. Little Li Jinglong then took his hand and led him all around, meandering through the streets and alleys. He bought some street snacks, yet he didn't eat them himself, instead giving them to little Hung Jun to eat. They stood in the western market, watching Jiayu sell her handmade incense bags in the market, only for her customers to pick and choose amongst them and haggle with her on the price, her face red. He saw the Chang'an medicine hall that his father was seeing patients at, and he and little Li Jinglong peered in from a distance. The people who came were all innocent residents with no one to turn to. Kong Xian, however, suddenly found that his son had escaped outside. Little Hung Jun thought, oh no, but just as he was about to hide, his father winked and smiled at him, gesturing for him to hurry back. The sun set behind the western mountains, and little Li Jinglong swung around a water gun that they had used to play with as he and little Hung Jun headed home. Little Hung Jun hugged a stack of paper and brushes in one hand, while little Li Jinglong held his other hand. Starting from tomorrow on, I have to go to school, little Li Jinglong said to little Hung Jun. I won't be at home during the day, but as soon as classes are over, I'll head right back. His words implied that he was very reluctant to part from Hung Jun. The Hung Jun of that time didn't know what school was, until little Li Jinglong packed his stuff the next day and went to school. He could only wait in the yard, utterly bored, until little Li Jinglong came back to keep him company. Yellow leaves fell, and winter arrived. He mentioned to his parents that he also wanted to go to school, but that very night, his request caused Kong Xian and Jiayu to once again have another argument. Little Hung Jun was very afraid of his parents arguing, because every time they started to fight, he always had a sense that it was because of himself. After they finished, his mother would grow dejected, and she would shed tears when no one was watching. His father would watch him for a long time, guilt in his gaze, without saying a single word. When he was even younger, he often fell sick, and every time he fell sick, his heart felt as if it was on fire, and the flames would spread through his entire body. Back then, his parents argued even more fiercely, but later, after a while, after Xiaoyu had come a few times, his illness slowly got better. Jiayu's, however, never forgot, and she was afraid that her own son would befall some other mishap. He will always have to do these things sooner or later. Kong Xian. He's just a child still, he doesn't understand anything. After this conflict, husband and wife came to a compromise. Jiayu taught her son how to recognize characters, while Kong Xian taught him how to write them. But what little Hung Jun wanted wasn't this, he simply wanted to go find little Li Jinglong, so that he wouldn't have to always wait eagerly for little Li Jinglong to finish school for the day. Little Li Jinglong would then come running out as the sky was growing dark, stroke little Hung Jun's face, and say, "I missed you so much," before they sat for a while and talked and finally went home to their respective houses. On the 8th of the last month, little Hung Jun somehow managed to find the school where little Li Jinglong was studying at, and he hung off the windowsill, peeking in. There were too many young children, and the sound of their voices reading out loud carried through the air. He peeked in room by room, before finally finding little Li Jinglong, sitting at the table furthest back in the schoolroom. Little Li Jinglong was in the middle of his growing period, and he had shot up in this past half a year. He was already beginning to look like an adolescent. Someone turned their head and saw little Hung Jun, before exclaiming, surprised, "Who's that?" Little Li Jinglong turned to look, and he hurriedly rose when the teacher was taking a nap, keeping himself hunched over as he had Hung Jun follow behind him. Little Hung Jun originally thought that Li Jinglong would tell him to go home, yet he hadn't thought that he would let him sit by his side instead. The teacher didn't notice him either, instead opening his eyes and rousing himself, before continuing with the lesson. "Li Jinglong, who's this?" someone asked. "You're my wife." Little Li Jinglong pinched little Hung Jun's cheek. Since this was little Hung Jun's first time here, he found everything that he saw to be new and interesting, and he merely slapped Li Jinglong's hand away before methodically looking through the papers on his desk. "Did you miss me?" little Li Jinglong whispered into little Hung Jun's ear, smiling as he did so. Little Hung Jun ignored him as he continued to dig through little Li Jinglong's stuff. He pulled out every article and inspected it, and after looking over it, he put it back as it was. Young Li Jinglong had grown in physique, and he had already started to develop that aura of safety and reliability. "Did you miss me while you were at home?" little Li Jinglong asked into little Hung Jun's ear, after listening to the lesson for a while. Little Hung Jun was currently flipping through his books, and he had just lowered his head to look at the 1,000-character classic. There were also explanations that Li Jinglong had written himself in there, and Hung Jun simply n-ed. Little Li Jinglong then took his hand, holding it in his grasp, stroking his hand back and forth over the back of Hung Jun's hand. Little Hung Jun could only adapt by flipping through the book with a single hand. After reading for a while, little Hung Jun grew sleepy, so little Li Jinglong sat crisscross, letting little Hung Jun put his head on his thigh to take a midday nap. After that day, little Li Jinglong had no more interest in studying, and oftentimes he'd stare out the window of the school. Studying was boring, until someone said, "Li Jinglong, your little wife's come." The group would then laugh at that, while little Hung Jun, dragging the corners of his robe, hunched over and entered from the back door, behind everyone. He hid from the teacher's gaze as he carefully ran in, sitting down beside little Li Jinglong. Everyone liked Hung Jun and wanted to talk to him, but little Li Jinglong didn't let little Hung Jun acknowledge them. Little Hung Jun was also satisfied with having a little Li Jinglong, so he didn't really have much of a desire to make friends. Then, there came a day where one of little Li Jinglong's classmates offhandedly gave little Hung Jun a box of powder. Little Hung Jun didn't know what that was, so he shook his head, confused, and pushed it away. The classmate remarked, "You don't even know what powder is. That's not right, you're a boy." Everyone. All the children thought that little Hung Jun was some daughter of a noble family who had snuck in wearing boys' clothing. They actually thought that he was really Li Jinglong's future wife, but they hadn't expected him to be a boy. Immediately, everyone in the school was struck dumb. "Isn't this Dr. Kong's son?" someone else pointed out. "He looks a lot like his father. Don't tell that to anyone outside of here." Little Li Jinglong grew flustered at that, and he hurried to make sure that his classmates would keep that a secret. Little Hung Jun hid behind little Li Jinglong, a little afraid. After all, in his world, aside from his parents there was only little Li Jinglong. Conversing with such a large group of people was far beyond the capacity that he had for understanding people. "Who is he to you?" His group of classmates had eaten and drunk their fill, so one of them grabbed little Li Jinglong who was grinning from ear to ear, asking little Hung Jun that question. Little Hung Jun watched the group warily. He didn't really like being with these people, so he said to little Li Jinglong, "Let's go home." Let's go home, let's go home," little Li Jinglong chuckled. "Ayo, what are you saying?" Everyone couldn't help raising a fuss at that, but little Li Jinglong knew that little Hung Jun was afraid of strangers, so he took him home. Thankfully, little Li Jinglong had them keep the secret, but the result of keeping that secret was little Li Jinglong losing a month of his pocket money so that he could pay for his classmates to go drinking. Where did all of these things on you come from? Probably what Li Jinglong gave him. Singer, you're not allowed to take his stuff anymore, you hear me? N. When they had played before at home, without heading outside to see anyone, the two little children ran around unkempt, not a single clean spot on their bodies. But Li Jinglong was almost an adolescent, and he was also a descendant of a gentry clan, so there were more rules of etiquette imposed upon him on a daily basis. When he went outside, naturally he had to take note of his outfit, and more importantly, he had to pay extra careful attention to little Hung Jun's outfit. With that, little Hung Jun's outfit often had agar wood or a string of alabaster beads that Li Jinglong added on for him, with an emerald pendant at his waist and agate hair clasps and rings, as well as a white scarf that had come from who knows where. Sometimes, before they left, Li Jinglong would even have him change into a set of clothes that he himself had worn when he was 8 or 9, to prevent Hung Jun from staining his robes with ink, which would rouse Jiuyu's suspicions. This caused the Kong family to have more and more of the random odds and ends that originally came from the Li family, as if Li Jinglong had moved a good chunk of his family's study over. But after half a month, because of a trivial matter, Li Jinglong had an argument with his classmates. Originally, his classmates had always made jokes about them, and they circled around little Hung Jun, teasing him. That caused him to grow a little timid, but Li Jinglong grew irritated at their words, and he told them to shut up. As things escalated, they began to fight. At the start, it was no more than holding the other down and giving them a few punches, but he hadn't thought that that classmate wouldn't be able to take it lying down and actually arranged for a fight instead. The result was that Li Jinglong took care of him in just a few blows. This was even more embarrassing for the classmate, so he called up quite a few thugs that had nothing better to do and had them stop Li Jinglong and little Hung Jun on their way home, so that they could teach this bastard a lesson. That was a winter twilight, and the cold pierced right to the bone. 6 youths stood with wooden sticks in their hands, and young Li Jinglong had been beaten to the point where he was curled up on his side on the ground, blood trickling slowly out of his nose. Little Hung Jun stood in the alley, trembling non-stop as he watched this scene. "Let go of him," little Hung Jun shouted at them at the top of his lungs. Li Jinglong wiped a handful of blood off his face, struggling to his feet, only for another blow to land on his body, and he immediately fell back down, face first. There was a huge boom, and devil chi exploded outwards across the sky, enveloping the entire darkened alley. Li Jinglong widened his eyes, staring at little Hung Jun speechlessly. Behind Hung Jun appeared a peacock's tail feathers, and his eyes glowed with black flames. His entire body gave off blood-colored ripples that kept spreading outwards. Shooing, Li Jinglong struggled to his feet, and he stood there as if he was in a dream. Hung Jun and the luminous Liu Su held hands as they floated in the air. Hung Jun's pupils suddenly contracted, and his arm could not stop trembling. That black chi bubbled out, growing larger and larger, and the entirety of Chang'an sank under it. The streets cracked and split, while the houses collapsed, as if thousands of mountains were collapsing, and millions of seas were sinking in on themselves. And it was just at this moment that 6 places, the Dian Pagoda, the Exorcism Department, the Cian Temple, the Baolun Pagoda, the Sishui Terrace, and the Astronomical Observatory, began to glow with a golden light at the same time. The golden light turned into a huge array that protected Chang'an, just managing to fend off the destruction of the black energy. "No way!" Hung Jun said, almost at a shout. "Why don't I remember this?" "Steady!" Liu Su said to Hung Jun. He had a sense of foreboding that this was a very important scene. Maintain control over your emotions. End chapter.